Hello everyone. So for my textbook case study presentation, I'm doing chapter 20. I was very intoxicated, an examination of the image repair discourse of Ryan Lochte following the 2016 Olympics. So if you go on to the next slide, which I've attached the slides as well, it's the background on Lochte. So he was second most in swimming, in medals in swimming at the Olympics, and that's behind Michael Phelps, of course. Some nicknames he had to set up kind of how he was viewed is that he was America's sexiest douchebag and a joke the size of the Olympic swimming pool. So going into this case, you have to remember that background of him is that he wasn't viewed in the greatest terms. He had his own reality TV show called What Would Ryan Lochte Do in 2013. And, if you've ever seen that, it's him doing a lot of crazy antics. So again, not that good of a view of him. And going into the Olympics, Americans, including him, were warned of the Rio crime rate and that it was a problem there, so they knew that ahead of time going into it. So on to the next slide, a little bit of a summary of the case. So it's set in the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and the case will be examining what happened after the incident. So the incident is after the final race. Lochte claims him and his teammates were held at gunpoint, and within a week, that story was proved not to be true. It was proved that Lochte's claims were false due to surveillance camera footage of him basically, he was at a gas station and him and his teammates were breaking in and vandalizing, I believe it was a bathroom. So it was very quickly proved that it was false, and the officers that showed up never held him at gunpoint, even though Lochte went on TV saying that, and we watched that in class as well, he went on TV saying that he was held at gunpoint, which came to be completely not true. And on August 18th, he posted an apology on Instagram, and then 2 days after that, he appeared on NBC admitting that the entire incident that he talked about was false, and he was taking responsibility for it. Right after that, 4 of his sponsors dropped him, and he was suspended from USA Swimming for 10 months. So this is obviously very bad for him and his image, along with the image he already had. And he tried to restore this image by appearing on Dancing with the Stars and announcing his girlfriend's pregnancy while also proposing to her as well. And we'll get into this later, but he also used social media posts and other strategies to attempt to repair his image, which included TV interviews as well. And the question here is, what could he have done better? And we're going to get into that. So what happened after the truth came out? I'm jumping a little bit around here in the chapter because I think it flows better this way. A Brazilian sociologist stated that people feel vulnerable and angry when Americans come down here and act like they can do whatever they want with no respect for rules or regard for the locals. So basically saying this stupid American came down here and made us look bad. The Rio mayor said shame and contempt for what he had done. And the Brazilian police charged Lochte with the false report, of course, because he lied to the police saying he did that. And what we get out of all of this is that America looks bad. He is a symbol of America. Like I said, he is the second best swimmer medals-wise for the U.S. team, and he does this. So the book talks about Benoit's, I believe that's how you say it, his image restoration theory. And there are 14 total, but there are 5 main steps. So the first one is denial, and there's simple denial and shifting blame. So obviously denial, you're just saying that it didn't happen. There's evading responsibility, which has provocation, defeasibility, making excuses, and demonstrating good intentions. And then you have reducing offensiveness, so trying to minimize what happened. And that gets into bolstering, minimization, differentiation, transcendence, attacking the accuser, and compensation. And then there's corrective action, so trying to make up for your mistakes, basically. And then the last step is mortification, which basically means that you take great embarrassment and shame for what happened. So the main 5, remember, are denial, evading responsibility, reducing offensiveness, corrective action, and mortification. So how did Lochte actually try to restore his image? He used a mix of traditional and social media. So he did TV interviews and he did a lot of posts. And that's what he thought, or probably coached by a lot of people were, as we talked about in class, we saw the interviews where it looked like he was completely coached on what he was saying. He had 5 television interviews and 136 Twitter posts and 91 Instagram posts over the 4-month period where the case study kind of analyzes this, where it looked at posts that were directly about this incident. And in the study conducted of 241 sentences of his TV interviews, remember this is the TV interviews, Lochte used more than 125, which is 51.9% of those 241 sentences. He used mortification. So for 125, he was using mortification in his TV interviews. So that's the shame and embarrassment. He was saying, like I said, he took full responsibility and he was ashamed of his actions. 40 of the sentences analyzed were just giving more background information on what happened. 31 sentences, which was 12.9%, were corrective action. So he was trying to do something to correct what he had done wrong. There were 22 occurrences where Lochte was using an excuse, which is under the category of evading responsibility. So again, on his TV interviews, although he was 51% mortification, and that's probably the most thing he used, he was a little all over the place at times. But again, he was trying to get that mortification across where it was just great shame for what he had done. And the remaining were used in less than 5% of the sample, so the rest of these are less than 5% of those 241 sentences. They were defeasibility, minimization, transcendence, compensation, and provocation. So those appeared in descending order, but they weren't as much as used as that 51% of mortification. Now, on to the next slide of social media. If you've been following along on the slides, this is the social media slide. It looked much different. No mortification. He had 227 posts, like I said, and 221 of those 227 posts, so 97.4%, fell into the category of bolstering, which means he just reminded everyone of previous good actions. He was just trying to say, like, I'm a good guy, like, this isn't me. And bolstering is under the category of the 5. It's under reducing offensiveness. So basically, he was just going around saying, hey, look at all these things I've done. Look how great I am. This is like what I said with announcing he was getting married. He had proposed to his fiancée, and he had a baby on the way. He was trying to say, look how good I am. And out of those 227 posts, 4 were corrective action and 2 were mortification. So an entirely different kind of setting here from TV versus social media. And I think that's really interesting to look at, is that on one side, he's this totally different representation, the shame and stuff like that. And then on social media, he's like, hey, look at me, look how great I've been. So if we go into the next slide here, which is the you make the call section, we see that he uses the mortification and bolstering. But he also did some other things too. He went on the Brazilian TV station called TV Globo, I believe, which is just like a large Brazilian TV station, and he just kept apologizing for what he had done. But the main thing he did was that he tried to reinvent his image. Like we had said before, and then talked about in class, he's this guy who's labeled as a douchebag. He is not somebody that people are really looking up to besides his swimming abilities. So he becomes a family man. And we saw that interview in class where he talked about, it was years later, and he was talking about how he had changed and he's much different now. And that's what he was trying to do. He didn't want to be this frat boy anymore. He wanted to try and change his image so that people started, backing him again. And he did not attempt to shift blame or attack the accusers and just admitted his lie. He admitted what he did was wrong. And because of this, he actually started to pick up new sponsors because of his guilt. He became part of the hashtag Clean Start Pledge from the company Power Bar, which he stated in commercials that his antics were behind him. So basically, they were trying to, help him repair his image. And another one or his main saving grace was this idea that he's taking full responsibility of his actions, which I find weird again, because if you look at his social media, he wasn't doing that. He was just talking about, look how great I am. But another thing he had going for him is that Michael Phelps had said, it's not what you did, it's what you do now. And that was on Ellen. And it's what you do now that will shape who you are. That's what he said. He also stated that Lochte also stated that he wanted to be a role model for children and did not want to be a bad example. So this idea of restoring his image, and he wants to be better. And that's how he kind of got out of this mess, is that he used mortification on the TV side and then bolstering on the social media side. So I think next is to kind of look at what I think about the situation, what I would have done. That's the next slide. In my opinion, I would have only used a combination of mortification and corrective action. I know this is hard because if I was that drunk and doing stupid stuff like that, I'm probably not going to lie when I get on national television when there's definitely going to be evidence of the situation. The best thing to do, though, if you do lie, like he did, is say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. It was a bad mistake. Here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And I'm sure he has plenty of people that could have started foundations or anything to, help him reinvent his image. Or not reinvent his image, but, do something to correct the problem. And I think although he did pick up sponsors, you have to remember he did lose a lot of sponsors, and he was hated, and he was going through a very sad time after this, which, some say might rightfully so, for what he had done. And I think that's hard, but it's what you got to do to get through that. You got to accept what you did, say it's shameful action, and here's what I'm going to do to fix it. Now, for this as well, we have to go into questions so that we can kind of go through a discussion. So the one I liked from the book was, do you think the fact that many already had a negative impression of his intelligence played a factor in how quickly he was able to repair his image? Why not? So do we think that because he looked like this horrible dude before the situation and then he did it, do you think that played a role in how he had to repair his image? And then my question is take the part where he lied out of the equation. Put yourself in his shoes. What would your immediate response be to the world if you were in his shoes? Which of Benoit's steps would you have used to correct the situation? And I think that's the best way we can go about, kind of working through this case, is putting ourselves in his shoes and figuring out what we would have done. So this has been my presentation. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.